Hey, welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, and joining me as usual is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, welcome back from Vegas, my friend.
No, it's good to be back, and it's time to, we've shipped all this launch content. There's a lot of great blogs, but it's time to actually upgrade my lab. And, I need to trying to test the new vSAN features, and for that, I also need to, upgrade vSphere because it's the same thing. It's the same upgrade path. So, but I need to figure out what the order is and what the process is, and make sure it'll be simple. So, time to go figure that out.
Yeah, I agree. And as we said, Explorer was last week. There were so many announcements. So obviously 8 Update 2 for both vSphere and vSAN. And we did do a deep dive with Pete Keeler on vSAN. So if you haven't heard that yet, by all means, link below, take a look. But now it's time to talk about the mothership, which is vSphere. And we've got some experts on the call to give us all the announcements, starting with our good friend and partner in crime, Mr. Ken Werneberg. How you doing, sir?
I've rarely been this good in my life ever. Thank you for asking.
For those that are only listening to this podcast, I recommend you watch the video because Ken Werneberg, you look great, man. You look amazing. Your camera, I don't know what you're doing over there, but you're really looking like, I don't know. It's amazing. Great color.
Well, now I'm blushing. So
this is no longer a technical podcast. This is just an AV production podcast.
It should be.
Thank you for getting on this ride, everyone.
Ken, we'll put in the show notes of the podcast. Let everybody know which camera you're using, which lights, and all that stuff. But for today, we're going to talk about vSphere. And if we're going to talk about the details of vSphere, we might as well bring on one of the really smart guys, our good friend, formerly from Ireland, now currently living in Canada. Féidhlim, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I don't have as fancy a setup as Ken. I'm in a retrofitted garden shed. So thankfully, the weather's not very hot today. When we tried to do this earlier in the week, I was sitting here sweating, and I was glad that we had to postpone because it wasn't comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. Well, no, I'm glad that we made time to do this. I know there's a lot of great updates. I was obviously reading about those while we were at Explore, and I was like, oh, we definitely got to get Féidhlim on and talk about some of these. I want to start with one of the big ones I saw, which was the whole, distributed services engine. I think that whole story is super interesting, and I'd love for you to share the details on that.
Sure, yeah. So we first launched the distributed service engine, or vSphere, on DPUs back with vSphere 8 GA, and we've just made incremental improvements through Update 1 and now Update 2. We're adding additional support for more vendors, so things like Lenovo, Fujitsu, they're on board now with their certified systems, various DPU models from NVIDIA and AMD Pensando. So we're expanding that ecosystem all the time, and there's going to be additional vendors and additional, hardware configurations come on board as well in the future. It's kind of something we really blasted out at the start of vSphere 8's release, last year. But we want to make sure that it's not forgotten. We're continuously looking at improving and expanding that ecosystem and improving all that great technology with the DPUs.
So the question I have, just real quick here, for people who are sitting at home and saying, okay, DPU, SmartNIC, whatever you want to call it, this thing that has all this co-processing, what are the use cases to where, like, if I'm buying a new server, I need to spec that? At what point is it just kind of a no-brainer that I need to put that on the bill of materials?
Well,
I guess it depends on what sort of workloads you're going to be running. It's tending to lean a little bit towards the whole AI/ML workloads as well. GPUs and DPUs are starting to become a little bit more coupled together in terms of the workloads are going to accelerate on the GPU, and they're also going to leverage the DPUs as well for any of that network traffic, because we offload the network services, the NSX services, to those DPUs for better performance, and we're freeing up some of those CPU cycles to get back to those workloads.
Yeah, I think if you look at the history of the program in general, back when we introduced that as Project Monterey, you'll see that really it stems out of this space where we're talking about networks first and foremost. So they are SmartNICs initially, and then we realized that, hey, this SmartNIC has this ARM processor on there that we can do things with. And of course, with the network being proximal to that CPU, it just makes the most sense to start there. So it's about a couple of things. It's about performance and obviously maximizing the throughput, but it's also about reducing the footprint of the ESXi server itself. So taking some of those services and offloading them. And if you think about that, so John, today, yeah, the one that makes sense is what Féidhlim is talking about, which is really about offloading NSX networking. But really, that framework is wide open in terms of the types of services we could offload, the types of accelerations that we could put on that onto this dedicated ARM chip. So really, it's a framework that we're delivering in multiple stages and putting different workload types onto it. So, stay on top of that and see, if something pops up on that roadmap where we say, hey, now we can do this with these ARM processors on the SmartNICs, on the DPUs. Then it's really up to your individual workload type. So stay with us on that framework and you'll see increasing offloads taking place on the DPUs.
Okay, so high throughput shops that are looking at, offloading NSX for today, question mark for tomorrow. Watch this space. So no.
Well, yeah,
exactly. And if you're looking at buying hardware, if you're thinking about, refreshing hardware, you can buy DPU ready systems today from the various vendors. They've got them pre-installed. There are some vendors that are able to retrofit DPUs into your existing hardware, or you'll be able to buy hardware that is DPU ready, doesn't come with the DPU yet, but it'll be very easy to just slot it in and press go.
Because it is a bit bigger, like it's a bigger card that uses a bit more power than a standard, just, ancient X710 or something. So you've got to make sure you've got, thermal overhead, power overhead in the host. So don't just assume you can replace, your little PCI 1 card with one of these.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that this will be the eventually, like, not that you have to commit to this, but just your thoughts? Like, do you think that this is the way moving forward, where everything is just offloaded and put on hardware as opposed to built into the software and managed inside of your host?
It's hard to know. I think we're going to start with offloading some kind of services of ESXi and vSphere onto the DPUs, but we'll probably keep the base ESXi function on that x86 CPU.
I mean, if you look
think
at
about the increasing use cases, sorry, John, if you think about some of these use cases down the road, I think it comes back to what Féidhlim was talking about with the convergence of DPUs and GPUs. If you think about distributing GPU workload to frame buffer across the wire, you need to get that data to it. You need to get it processed and you need to get it out of that box as quickly as you can. And having all of this sitting on the same bus, as it were, basically, can help streamline some of that as well. So when you start talking about scale, it becomes a different story, and some of that, converged 800 gigabit per second throughput starts to become a real benefit to it at that point too. So it really, this hardware is becoming a very, very important part of the server, because it does give you an extra location for doing both offloads, but also having that proximity to the GPU and some of these converged cards and things that we're seeing. Absolutely, when we start looking at massive data sets that need access to GPUs, that's going to become a use case for that as well. So it's all pretty dynamic right now.
You basically, the GPU potentially have like an RDMA or a bypass, like a direct access to the network, so it doesn't have to go through memory. Thinking to Pete, your question there, I guess, looking at history of, will the future be more offloads or cards on this? I think we all remember sound cards being a thing, and they were cool. And then that merged onto the CPU or the northbound chip. But inversely, I also remember that the northbound chip often used to handle a lot of the NIC offload, which in servers, discrete NICs we're going more in that direction, frankly, with DPUs. So I guess it's interesting with offloads. We've seen some stuff like encryption coprocessors where, Intel's Platinum CPUs can crunch encrypto pretty well. But on the other hand, the closer you get to the network, there's been more separation. So that's it. I ended up on a bus one time with a guy whose job was at VMware to guess which offload, and this was like 4 or 5 years ago, which of these was going to be the path. And I was like, oh, which one it is? He's like, oh, no one knows. Like, that's...
Well, if you think about, speaking of ancient history with Sound Blaster 16s and things like that, I always think about the coprocessor on the 286s. I remember I was like, oh man, I got to get a 286 with a coprocessor. That's gonna speed everything up. But unless you're actually doing the math instructions that are going to be offloaded to that 286, CoPro is not going to do anything for you. It's just
wasn't there a math bug in that 286 where they there was like some weird number that didn't crunch correctly? But that was fun. All right, let's delete that part.
Yeah, this is not a history lesson.
let's not get into the history of offloads and DPUs. What else is new with 8U2? How much easier is it just to upgrade? That's another thing. Like what's my upgrade path looking like?
Yeah, John, you mentioned you're going to be doing an upgrade, to to 8U2 hopefully. And having come from a support background, I worked in support for vSphere 4, 5, and the early 6 days. I know upgrading isn't always just press the button, get a cup of coffee, come back, and it's done.
What?
Things break,
Really?
things fail. But we've made a huge number of improvements, especially in vSphere 8 Update 2 now, around all that maintenance area. And to me, they're some of the more exciting things. They're not the coolest things, but from my background in VMware, I think they're pretty cool. So there's a couple of small things, like, when you're doing a vCenter upgrade, and John, you'll do this, you'll get the checkbox to say, yes, I've taken a backup, but we know you didn't take the backup. You lie. And you continue anyway. And then the upgrade fails and, you're out of luck. So what we're actually doing now, we're giving you a get out of jail free card where we'll take an LVM level snapshot. So at the Photon Linux level, we'll take an OS level snapshot before any upgrade work or patching work takes place. So in the event that the patching might fail, you didn't take your backup, you didn't take your snapshot or whatever, you now do have a rollback mechanism that we're giving to you. But it's not a replacement for backups. Please do take your backups, file-based backups, image level backups, whatever you're doing, please do take them frequently. But this is a nice get out of jail free card. For those that tick the box, but lie about it.
Are these accessible, or are they just they're used in the event that they need to be, but they're not like somebody can be like, oh, I bet they're there. I can manage that outside of this process.
No, yeah,
Okay.
you can't manage it. It's all kind of automated. Once you do the patching event, the first thing that the system will kick off an LVM snapshot. If the patching task succeeds, that LVM snapshot will get automatically wiped away. So it's just there as that get out of jail free card if your patching fails.
There are features that are driven by customers. There's features that are driven by field requests. There's features that are driven by engineering or product managers. And then there are features that I can smell a million miles away that were driven by the support organization. And this is clearly the latter, I'm going to guess.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine because, even though we do have the native file-based backup tool now, before those, back in the vSphere 4 or 5 days, the amount of customers I worked with, that didn't take a backup, you'll ask them, did you take your backup? And they'll sheepishly kind of skirt around the question, maybe go,
Yes.
oh, WebEx drops.
Well, and one of the challenges that I think people sometimes have kind of missed was that people would back up the virtual machine using VADP, using their regular backup process, which is fine if it's a standalone vCenter. But when you started getting into distributed PSCs or enterprise link mode and things like that, you now have a distributed database that's doing rollback. And it's kind of like doing domain controllers back before they became aware of VM snaps. You've got the back in time problem. And so restoring those backups was always dicey, particularly with linked mode. So that's why, by the way, even if you are using Commvault or Veeam or whatever to do your backup, please go configure the file backups. It is important, and it gives you an extra layer, and it's glad to hear we have a third layer here of defense for this.
Exactly. The other cool thing that this is bringing as well in 8U2 is all around distributed switches. And again, that story of backup. We've all been at that stage probably where we've restored from backup and, our backup could have been a week or a month old or whatever. So now our distributed switch is all out of whack. And it can be a pain to get it back into sync, to get all those port groups back that you created after the backup was taken and all that, and it can be a huge mess. We're actually removing that entire problem in vSphere 8 Update 2 because we have the most up-to-date copy of the DVS or the VDS on the ESX hosts themselves. So now when vCenter gets restored, it queries its respective clusters and goes, okay, this is my VDS information. What do you have? Oh, yours is more up to date, and I'm going to consume that. And it removes all that manual resync, recreate, and it's pretty seamless. It's kind of hard to appreciate unless you've ever been in that situation where you've had to manually rebuild distributed switches and stuff.
Oh, you have to rip one of the uplinks off, build a standard switch, attach the vCenter, go through that whole process. Yeah, I've actually had an outstanding feature request for 7 years to automate backing up the VDS. So I didn't actually know this is shipped, but that was like one of the 3 things I came into this company when I joined here 8 years ago of like my requests. So yay.
I think
Yeah,
if you look at the
I
way we're
wouldn't call
doing
it a backup. Sorry, Ken. I wouldn't call it a backup of the VDS. We're essentially reconciling the current state of the VDS that's living on the clusters.
Yeah.
Oh,
or
to
living on
prevent
the
out of
host.
sync issues between versions. Got it. Well, that's
Exactly,
still
yeah.
that covers the main reason for that, so that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can back up the VDS kind of ad hoc as well, but an automated one of those would be cool too.
It's the same
Yeah.
sort of thing that we were doing, and in fact, it uses the same mechanism, unless I'm mistaken, for host and cluster membership previously with the distributed key value system. So,
Yeah.
rather than having everything need to try to resynchronize, we maintain that as part of a distributed state with this key store across all of the hosts, so that for cluster membership on rejoining, it's got its own state that it informs VC about, rather than trying to inherit some perhaps out of date.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving vCenter. We're moving the source of truth from being vCenter historically to being a little bit of more of what the cluster knows about it, because typically it's a better source of truth, and we're trying to make vCenter more stateless.
Well, and that was particularly why I wanted the backups in the VDS is if your vCenter for some reason corrupted or someone deleted it or something silly happened, it was like, great, now none of my hosts know what's going on. They're kind of zombieing on the VDS and moving that to a distributed model that mirrors already what vSAN does with some MDS, but that also mirrors like how DRS is now, and HA have become I guess HA was always kind of a distributed service, but even DRS is now a distributed service. And if you think about HA, it's one of the most bulletproof things VMware's ever built. Like, it's just so reliable and it works. And the reason it works is because it doesn't actually depend on vCenter outside of configuration. It's a very distributed system. There's a lot of resiliency in that design.
Yeah,
It's one of the reasons it works through failure. I wouldn't say that's one of the reasons it works, but yeah. Exactly.
Well,
Fair
yeah.
It responds. Yeah. Is it? And we don't need to dig too deep down this hole, but is it like Stretch Cluster has like a tiebreaker situation where if one is available, then there's a tiebreaker that says, oh, this is the most authoritative source based on timestamp, and then makes that decision. So therefore, there's 3 people in the decision at all times. So how does it decide? What is the more recent copy?
I'm not 100% sure if it actually checks which is more recent. I think it may assume that the cluster has the most recent information.
Okay,
but I'd need to ask engineering on that.
Completely not needed information, just more curiosity.
Yeah.
My understanding was it was actually just a push from the ESXi hosts themselves for that configuration information. So it updates the vCenter from the ESXi hosts.
Nice.
My understanding on that.
Nice. So upgrades, there's a lot of different parts involved in upgrades. We have to upgrade our ESXi host. We have to upgrade vCenter. Previous versions, these were done separately. Everything is now inside of vSphere. Are there any updates in regards to that with update 2?
Well, the biggest thing we've done in update 2 is bring what we've called reduced downtime upgrade from vSphere Plus or Cloud Connected offering to on-prem. And what this does is you still upgrade vCenter, but you're reducing your overall downtime from what could be an hour plus when you're doing even go from update 1 to update 2 down to less than 5 minutes of downtime. Now your total end-to-end work, let's say as a sysadmin, might be relatively the same, but your downtime is significantly shortened here with this reduced downtime upgrade method. And you'll be able to use this to actually go from 8.0 or 8.0U1 to 8.0U2. It's not one of those features you have to get to 8.0U2 first and then can use forward on. You'll actually be able to use this to upgrade from any version of 8 to 8.0U2. And the reason this is different is it's a migration-based upgrade. Even if you're doing a minor patch or an update, 8.0U1 to 8.0U2, or in the future 8.0U2 to 8.0U2 ABCD or whatever, you can opt to use this migration-based approach, which is very similar when we're doing a major upgrade from 7 to 8, for example, because we still deploy a brand new vCenter VM. We copy all the data across, but the big difference here is that we keep both online at the same time. The new vCenter, the 80U2 vCenter, has a temporary IP address. They're both online at the same time. All the data gets copied over. And then at your leisure, whenever you want to kick the button, you press the switchover button, and then we shut down the services on the original, power them up on the other one. Roughly 3 to 5 minutes downtime, vCenter is upgraded. So the end-to-end workload, you still have to deploy and configure a new appliance, but that's all guided for you. But that downtime piece is only 3 to 5 minutes, which is huge.
That's a big difference.
10x less downtime.
Well, and what's nice with this is this fundamental design is this is one of those things when you do these stand-up 2 copies and then it chunks over, is if there's a failure in that process, you've got a clean failback. You just power back on the old one. Because I remember we did like I think a major upgrade this way some years back. And I remember I had a problem. It's like, oh, power that off, power on the old one. Cool, you roll back. And this helps a couple ways. One, this obviously, as you mentioned, shortens the time. But this also de-risks the process significantly. And it makes it to where you should be able to make it more comfortable to do during the middle of the day. Which is like a long rant I have if we need to stop patching at 3 a.m. or whatever. Like, let's do this at lunch. Like, because if it's a 5-minute blip over, no one will probably notice. And for those of you who are like, well, if my vCenter's down for an hour, who cares? Well, there's people who, if you're running Horizon, if you're running VRA, if you're running any type of automation on top of that, you've got VCD or some type of CMP, you're going to cause an outage for those people, and they'll actually complain and they'll be annoyed. So
you like you said, you can actually do the 99% of the work during production hours because it's not disruptive to the running vCenter. Have it all staged, have it ready to go, ready to hit that switchover button, and then do that, on Friday or Saturday when you don't have that, when you can take that outage.
Oh, Friday is a read-only day for me. That's my religion. So, but no, it's but even if you, let's say they do say, okay, you got to make that change during 8 to midnight or something. You 8 o'clock, you log in, you hit go. Oh, it's done, and then you go back to eating dinner or go back to whatever it is. You go back to the show versus actually having to sit there for the full hour and a half after hours. So, I mean, maybe somebody's going to get paid less overtime, but I think most people would rather have their weekends.
Exactly. And so this I think is going to be huge, and it'll hopefully encourage customers to upgrade more frequently, get onto that latest build just quicker rather than sitting on 8.0 or sitting on 8.0U1 because they can't get the right time change or this change window to do an hour plus upgrade of downtime. So hopefully this will negate those challenges.
Yeah, reducing the downtime, but also risk mitigation. I mean, there's no reason not to do this. It reduces, every problem associated with upgrades across the board. And philosophically, one of the things I like about this is just the fact that we introduced it first through the VMware Cloud. And I think to me, this is that delivery mechanism that we've been talking about for ages, where we can reduce the number of variables for us to be able to write new code and deliver things more quickly to the on-prem customers because we've kind of gone through and deployed it through our cloud services first and kind of said, yeah, this is functional. It's going to be good for end users to run on-prem. So I like that, deploy it on small blast radius of our VMware Cloud initially, make sure it's 100% bulletproof, and then cascade it out. So just from a design philosophy perspective, I like it.
Yeah, it's been tested for sure. I like that. So as we all know, the buzzword at VMware Explore was artificial intelligence. AI/ML, absolutely. Yeah. So I was waiting for John to slip in some snarky response. But yeah, it was definitely AI and ML. VMware Private AI Foundation with NVIDIA took front stage. Heck, every conversation John and I had, whether it was with a VMware customer, employee, everybody was talking about it. Customers talking about how they're going to be trying to take advantage of some form of AI in their future workloads and their designs. Maybe we can break down some of the specific changes as it pertains to vSphere 8 Update 2.
Yeah, I mean, vSphere supported GPUs for a long time now, but we're making them more like first-class citizens. They used to be able to do snapshots or vMotion or any of that sort of stuff, and we've gradually added those functionalities to GPU-enabled VMs. We support, massive GPUs with the NVIDIA NVLink and NV switch, up to, was it 8 of those or 16 of those, all linked together. Just massive powerhouses of computation in one ESXi host. 16 vGPUs for if you want to carve up those GPUs to your virtual machines. You can have different VG profile types across your virtual machines. So, even before we announced the private AI foundation at VMworld, or sorry, VMware Explore, GPUs were, GPU workloads were running great on vSphere, and we're really investing in that workload space. Some of the things that we're doing in 8.0U2 is around their mobility, the mobility of those workloads, things like vMotion, and making sure that they have what we're calling kind of like a quality of service when it comes to vMotion. So the first thing is that DRS is now going to be smarter when it comes to placing GPU-enabled VMs. In the past, it didn't really see the GPU as an entity. It just looked at memory, CPU, and it didn't really understand where should I not place a GPU-enabled VM. So now DRS is far better at that. It can understand how many physical GPUs are on your respective hosts and make smarter placement decisions for your vGPU VMs coming in. For example, we used to have scenarios in the past where, let's say you've got 3 ESXi hosts in your cluster, and each host has 4 GPUs, physical GPUs. So you might create a couple of 2 GPU VMs. They get distributed across all the 3 hosts, one on each host. You think, yeah, DRS is doing its job. It's balancing things evenly and fairly. However, now if we come in with a 4 GPU or a 3 GPU virtual machine, it's got nowhere to sit. We have the available physical GPUs, but there's not one host that can fit a 4 GPU VM.
Yeah.
So now DRS will actually move one of the smaller VMs to make space for the new larger VM coming in. And that's something DRS has never really done before. Move another workload to benefit an incoming or a new workload for placement. And it's also going to try and place those smaller VMs better, so that, if we did that scenario again on 8.0U2 initially, we would expect that we would fill up one host essentially with its GPUs first, to leave all the other hosts empty to accommodate larger VMs. So there's my colleague Justin actually has a more detailed blog on that for improving the VM placement. It's up on core.vmware.com. You can check that out for more details. But essentially, it's just smarter DRS awareness when it comes to GPU enabled VMs.
DRS is a wild feature because you've got balancing based off of network load on host, memory, CPU, now proactive eviction to find a fancier tenant for that slot. This is something that occasionally people are like, other companies can do DRS. I'm like, I don't think so. Like, it's the amount of R&D that is poured into this feature over the years is wild, and affinity groups and all the other stuff. But this is something particularly, what's the minimum order on GPUs or whatever? If you get 8 of them, that's like the equivalent of a Picasso painting or something. It's anything you can do to more efficiently pack those. That is a giant money printing device. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah.
If you get 8 GPUs, you can then have your own AI generator create your own Picasso from that.
There you go.
Actually, we're not talking to Ken. We're talking to a Gen AI robot because that's just a T100.
You've seen through my uncanny valley, and you can see the other side. Interesting.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, that's everything we're doing. We're doing everything to make vSphere the best place and the most optimal place to run your GPU workloads. Which sounds a bit salesy, a marketing statement coming from me, but it is true. Like John said, there's a huge amount of investment into really making those GPU workloads run as good as they can.
It's quite important that you have these platform level innovations irrespective of what you put on above them. I mean, really, it's about making that platform not application aware. We don't know what, is it doing inference? Is it doing whatever type of AI workload it's doing? But we have visibility into that infrastructure, and even when we talk about some of the stun time estimates and things like that for vMotion of GPU enabled systems, we're now saying that we want to have the administrators aware of the type of workloads that are running and have the infrastructure very responsive to those things. And I think if you look at some of the announcements that we made at Explore, things like reference architectures. Well, so what? Okay, you've got an RA for running AI ML. No, I mean, we've got specific application workload types for AI and ML purposes running on Cloud Foundation, enabled by these innovations at that vSphere level. So 16 vGPUs, 8 NVSwitch, GPU connections across hosts, things like that. That actually does feed into this higher level application performance and application result. So when Féidhlim says that, we're making sure that vSphere is the best place to run these things, it's actually true. We're doing these low-level platform type innovations to make it seamless and easy for the VI admins to help their data scientists context their workloads in as quickly, easily, seamlessly, and using all the same management models that they've had before with DRS and all the rest of those things. So, I mean, they're cool innovations that are. And one thing that was very interesting to me was at Explore, again, asking our customers, how many people are using these types of workloads, and we're all familiar with that. We start some new technology, and you show up at Explore, you're all excited. You go, "How many people are using this?" And how many hands usually go up? Like 2.
Yeah.
But here it was over half the room when Féidhlim was asking, how many people here are using or exploring AI ML for their data science in their enterprise. Over half the room had their hands up. So it's clearly an area where this investment that we're making in it is going to pay off for our customers.
Yeah, for sure. I think the timing was right for VMware to lean into this area. I'm sure there was a bit of, I wouldn't say luck, but yeah, the timing was great. All the work that we've done with supporting GPUs over time, and now as the world is definitely outside of the world of VMware is exploding, AI is everywhere, and I love the idea that VMware is just right there, with the private AI foundation with NVIDIA, supporting all these features built into our core operating system. I love it. We've only got a few more minutes left, Féidhlim. I know there's a lot of other issues going on, other updates. I'll give you the last word here. What is another update that we can chat about before we let you go?
Yeah, I'd say because we're low on time, I'll talk about some of the areas in our DevOps space or vSphere Tanzu area. So there's a couple of things there that are helping the deployment of vSphere Tanzu, and then the self-service kind of model, the kind of bring your own image model that we've been working towards. So first, on the configuration piece, you'll now be able to just import an existing config when you're enabling workload management or enabling a supervisor cluster. I don't know if you've done many of those, but it's quite tedious. There's a lot of things you need to answer, and if you get one wrong, you need to go back up and fix it. You'll now be able to export a known good configuration and re-import it to create a brand new supervisor cluster very quickly without having to fill in all the answers again, change just what you need to, and very easily deploy additional supervisor clusters or even clone supervisor clusters. So really, really powerful, will hopefully dramatically speed up some adoption of those clusters, because they can take a while to get right sometimes. In the VM service area, the bring your own image, we've kind of completed a lot of what we set out to do when we first announced vSphere Tanzu in vSphere 7. We now have a proper bring your own image model. You can now bring Linux, you can bring Windows VMs now and customize them, deploy them to your namespaces. The DevOps users don't have to log into vSphere.
Nice.
They are using their kubectl commands. They have their own little bubble of resources within their own permission boundary, and they'll be able to deploy anything from a content library now, TKG instances to run container workloads, but Linux VMs, Windows VMs, and they now be able to actually save all that back to a content library as well. And it's essentially a self-service image registry for them. In the past, the admin could only give read-only access to the developers, but now they can give read-write, share that read-write amongst multiple namespaces, or have your own. So it's very, very flexible, very, very powerful, and really it really does complete a lot of what we set out to do in the bring your own image model in that DevOps space.
Yeah, for sure. That's the whole goal, right? Is to empower your DevOps teams. I mean, if they're only given access to read, that's not the full story. So, giving them the ability to actually get the work done without having to communicate with a vSphere admin, I think is definitely the original goal. I'm glad to see that we're closer.
I think
Well,
the
I
other
like the bring
really
your own image and the other just small little details. Like it sounds not that important, but there's people who they standardize on Ubuntu or SUSE or Rail or whatever. It's handy.
Yeah, and that VM service aspect of this as well is highly important. I think a lot of people aren't aware that what we're doing with vSphere Tanzu and some of these other components here. It's not just about containers; it's about bringing that management model to the VMs as well. So being able to define your VMs and then manage them through a Kubernetes type of an interface and an API and all the rest of these components is very, very powerful as well. So you can consolidate your management of VMs in the same way that you would manage your containers and your supervisor services, all provide you this one centralized automation style for management, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people sometimes maybe misconstrue that vSphere Tanzu is only for Kubernetes. It's only for containerized workloads, and it's not. You could stand this up and then have your developers only working on traditional VMs. They may never touch a container in their lives, but they can still build their apps and deliver their apps using the VM service.
Yeah, kubectl for VMs. It's pretty cool.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. Everybody needs a kubectl once in a while. That is awesome. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of information that came out this past week at Explore. Lots of blogs. I know core.vmware.com is the main place to go for most information pertaining to vSAN and vSphere. You mentioned the demo with Justin. I'm going to be sure to leave that in the show notes. Anything else that we can, any other resources we can share with our audience before we take off?
I think that's about it. Everything on core.vmware.com can links out to anything that we've got on YouTube or any other of our sister channels there on the Tech Zone. So I think that's probably your best one-stop shop.
Okay, beautiful. Well, Féidhlim, Ken, thank you so much for giving us the update here, and we look forward to getting you guys back again. And until then, man, enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.